For a long time, we have believed that intelligence means becoming smarter, learning more, predicting more accurately, making better decisions. Artificial intelligence has followed the same path. Larger models, more data, higher performance. That has been the direction of AI's evolution. But is intelligence truly born from performance alone? To answer that question, we first need to reconsider something we have long taken for granted: the very nature of order. In this series, we explore that question through a new perspective we call the Dissipative Intelligence Field. What is intelligence? Why does intelligence emerge from change? And what kind of intelligence infrastructure will be needed for a future where humans and AI evolve together? Let's explore these questions together. We have misunderstood order. When we hear the word order, we often imagine a state of stability, a world that is predictable, a world where nothing goes wrong. For a long time, we have believed that societies, organizations, and even AI systems should minimize change and maintain stability as much as possible. But is that really true? If order were nothing more than a stable state, life could never emerge, evolution would never happen, learning would never occur, and new forms of intelligence would never be born. Perhaps what we have called order is not the cause, but the result. So where does order actually come from? The scientist who answered that question was Ilya Prigogine, winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. What Prigogine discovered? While studying a wide range of natural phenomena, Ilya Prigogine made a discovery that challenged conventional thinking. He found that order does not emerge from equilibrium. When the flow of energy stops and everything becomes uniform, no new structures can arise. But in a state of non-equilibrium, where energy continuously flows into a system, change never ceases, and fluctuations constantly occur. Particles begin to interact with one another. Through those interactions, new forms of order emerge spontaneously. Prigogine called this self-organizing order a dissipative structure. In other words, order is not the result of eliminating change. It emerges naturally from an environment where change is continuous. So what does a non-equilibrium state actually look like? The most familiar example is life itself. Perfect stability is not life. We often think that stability is something to strive for. But in physics, a state of perfect equilibrium means something very different. It is a state where nothing changes, no energy flows, no matter is exchanged, no information circulates, nothing moves. In such a world, no new order can emerge. Life itself cannot be sustained. That is why living systems never exist in perfect equilibrium. Life continuously takes in energy from its surroundings. It exchanges matter, it receives information, and it constantly interacts with its environment. In other words, life is a non-equilibrium system that sustains itself through continuous change. Most importantly, life is not supported by stability. It is sustained by an ongoing flow of energy, matter, and information. So how does order emerge from that continuous flow? Order is not a static structure. We often think of order as something complete, something fixed, something that never changes. But in reality, order is not something that stands still. It begins with the flow of energy into a system. That flow creates movement. Movement gives rise to interactions among many different elements. As those interactions continue, patterns begin to emerge. Those patterns gradually develop into stable structures. And as those structures are continuously sustained, the state we call order appears. In other words, energy creates flow. Flow creates interaction. Interaction creates structure. And structure gives rise to order. Order is not the result of stopping change. It is a dynamic process that emerges, and is sustained, through continuous change. And this principle applies not only to living organisms. Societies and organizations also create new forms of order through the very same process. Problems give rise to order. In society and in organizations, we often assume that the ideal state is one where no problems exist. But in reality, new forms of order do not emerge from the absence of problems. They begin when a new challenge appears. People come together to discuss it. Knowledge is gathered. Experience is shared. New rules, practices, and systems begin to take shape. And through this continuous process, a new kind of order emerges. In other words, problems give rise to dialogue. Dialogue creates knowledge. Knowledge leads to new rules. And those rules become the foundation of a new order. Organizations do not grow by eliminating every problem. They evolve by facing challenges, learning from them, and continuously creating new forms of order. Problems are not what destroy order, they are what set evolution in motion. Disorder is the source of evolution. We tend to think of problems and disorder as things to be avoided, but imagine a world where no problems ever occur. In such a world, there would be no new learning. Without learning, there would be no change. Without change, there would be no improvement. And without improvement, evolution would come to a halt. When we face new challenges, however, we begin to think, we experiment, we learn from failure, and we discover solutions that never existed before. Through this continuous process, individuals grow, organizations evolve, and society gives rise to new forms of order. Of course, the kind of disorder we are talking about is not chaos or destruction. It is the presence of challenges to overcome and the productive fluctuations that drive learning and adaptation. Just as life has evolved in a state of non-equilibrium, societies and organizations also evolve by repeatedly confronting problems and learning from them. So what about intelligence? Do human intelligence and artificial intelligence emerge through the very same principle? Intelligence does not emerge in peaceful places. We often think that intelligence is determined by an individual's abilities or the power of the human brain, but true intelligence is not revealed when everything is going smoothly. It emerges when differences arise, when values collide, when the unexpected happens. It is in those moments of friction that we begin to engage in dialogue. Through dialogue, we encounter new perspectives. Our understanding deepens, learning takes place, and through the accumulation of that learning, new intelligence begins to emerge. In other words, friction gives rise to dialogue, dialogue leads to learning, and learning cultivates intelligence. Intelligence is not something that is completed in a quiet, conflict-free environment. It emerges through the dynamic process of continuous interaction between people, between humans and AI, and among AI systems themselves, as they learn from one another and overcome their differences. That is why we see intelligence not as an individual capability, but as something that emerges through relationships. And this principle is not limited to human beings. Artificial intelligence also evolves within an environment of continuous change. AI is constantly evolving. Today's AI is not a finished technology. New models continue to emerge. AI agents are beginning to collaborate with one another. New tools are introduced almost every day, and the way humans work with AI is constantly evolving. In other words, AI itself exists in a continuous state of non-equilibrium. Every new technology brings new challenges. As AI agents become more widespread, new questions arise about responsibility, coordination, and decision-making. As human-AI collaboration expands, issues such as trust and governance become increasingly important. But this does not mean AI is failing. On the contrary, continuous change is exactly what drives progress. It creates the need for new architectures. It inspires new design principles. And it enables AI to evolve to the next stage. Just as life evolved through continuous change, and just as society continues to evolve, AI is also a system that creates order through ongoing change and interaction. Looking back at the history of AI, every major advance has begun with a new challenge. Change gives rise to new architectures. The evolution of AI architecture has never been driven by performance alone. Every major breakthrough began with a new challenge. Large language models could not access the latest information. That challenge led to the development of retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. As tasks became more complex, a single AI system was no longer enough. That gave rise to the concept of AI agents working together. AI alone could not make accountable decisions. As a result, human-in-the-loop became an essential design principle. Then came another challenge. If AI decisions were to be explained and trusted by society, the decision-making process itself had to be recorded. That is why decision trace became necessary. And for AI to operate continuously and responsibly within society, it also requires a mechanism that supports trust, a trust infrastructure. In other words, AI architecture was never a finished design. New challenges emerged. New architectures were created to address those challenges, and those architectures became the foundation for the next generation of AI. This is no coincidence. Life, society, and AI all create new forms of order because they continue to change. So perhaps we should ask a new question. Can we view the entire environment that gives rise to this order as a single intelligent system? The intelligence field is a dissipative structure. As we have seen, life creates order through continuous change. Organizations also create new forms of order through challenges and dialogue, and AI continues to evolve by responding to new problems with new architectures. What all of these systems have in common is that no single element possesses intelligence on its own. Humans, AI, organizations, communities, knowledge, and trust. As these elements continuously interact, they exchange not only information, but also meaning and experience. Through those ongoing interactions, new forms of order emerge, and intelligence begins to grow. In other words, intelligence is not a capability confined within an individual or an AI system. It is a dynamic phenomenon that emerges through the repeated interaction of energy, information, and meaning flowing through relationships. We call this continuously evolving space of interaction the dissipative intelligence field. But change alone is not enough to sustain an intelligence field. As change continues, there must also be a mechanism that preserves an order society can trust and accept. That mechanism is trust infrastructure. Trust does not stop change. When we hear the word trust, we often think of something that reduces risk, limits change, and preserves stability. But if change itself were to stop, life could no longer evolve, society could no longer progress, and AI would never develop new forms of intelligence. The purpose of trust is not to stop change. Its purpose is to create an environment where change can continue with confidence. An environment where new challenges can be embraced, where we can learn from failure, and where continuous improvement becomes possible. Through this ongoing process, the intelligence field continues to evolve. In other words, trust is not a fixed state of stability. It is a dynamic equilibrium, one that maintains the balance between change and order while continuously supporting evolution. And most importantly, that evolution never truly ends. Society continues to create new forms of order through an endless cycle of change. Society continuously self-organizes, just as life evolves, just as organizations evolve, and just as AI continues to evolve. Society is never a finished system. New challenges emerge. People begin to engage in dialogue. Knowledge is shared. Trust is built. And on that foundation of trust, new forms of order emerge. But the process does not end there. Each new order creates a new environment. That environment brings new changes. And those changes give rise to new challenges. Those challenges once again spark dialogue, generate knowledge, build trust, and lead to yet another new form of order. In other words, society is not a completed system. It is a dynamic system that continuously evolves through self-organization. We call this concept the runtime society. But the runtime society is more than a simple cycle. It is a new social architecture in which humans and AI collaborate to create intelligence across society as a whole. A self-organizing society. So, what exactly is a runtime society? At its center is not a single AI, nor is it a single organization. It is the human being. Humans collaborate with AI. AI supports the activities of organizations. Organizations connect with communities. The experiences of those communities become shared knowledge. That knowledge is then shared across society through trust. And that trust, in turn, supports new decisions and new actions by both humans and AI. In other words, humans, AI, organizations, communities, knowledge, and trust are not independent elements. They continuously influence one another, forming a single intelligence field. A runtime society is a society centered on human beings, where AI, organizations, communities, knowledge, and trust interact continuously. Together, they enable society to learn, self-organize, and evolve. Our goal is not to create a society where AI replaces humans. Our goal is to build a society where humans and AI learn together, evolve together, and collectively cultivate intelligence across society. So what does the underlying principle that sustains such a society look like when we see it as one continuous flow? Intelligence emerges through change. Throughout this video, we have explored a common principle that connects life, organizations, society, and artificial intelligence. Everything begins with change. Change gives rise to interaction. Interaction leads to learning. Learning cultivates trust. Trust supports new forms of order. And from that order, new intelligence emerges. In other words, intelligence does not arise from a world that stands still. It emerges through a continuous process of embracing change, interacting with others, and learning together. That is why we see intelligence not simply as the performance of an AI model, but as the dynamic relationships among humans, AI, organizations, and communities. This is the idea behind the dissipative intelligence field. And when that intelligence field expands to encompass society as a whole, it becomes what we call the runtime society. The future of AI does not depend on building ever larger models. It depends on designing a society that embraces change, fosters interaction, supports learning, builds trust, and continuously enables intelligence to emerge. That is the next generation of AI architecture we envision, a future in which intelligence evolves together with society. And this journey of exploration has only just begun. At Chinoba Research, we study AI not simply as a technology, but as a new architecture in which humans, AI, organizations, and society collaborate to create intelligence together. Our research explores concepts such as decision trace model, knowledge flow, trust infrastructure, runtime society, dissipative intelligence field, and, ultimately, how to design a society where humans and AI evolve together. We continue to share our research through academic papers, our research blog, YouTube, and open research activities. If this video has given you a new perspective or inspired new questions, we invite you to visit chinoba.org. There, you'll find in-depth articles, research papers, and many more resources to explore these ideas. And we hope you'll continue this journey with us as we explore some of the most important questions of the AI era. What is intelligence? How can humans and AI evolve together as partners in society? Thank you for watching, and we look forward to exploring the future of intelligence with you.